Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Thank you for your patience. We'll continue to work through some of our technical difficulties, but just in the interest of time, I wanted to get started. I want to thank everyone for coming out on this very cold evening for such an important topic. And just by way of disclosure, we are video recording. Just so you know, the cameras are right back here. For those who couldn't attend tonight, who are at home, this will be available online for later viewing because it is such an important topic. We wanted to make it available to our parents so they have another tool in their toolbox to parent in this modern age, which is sometimes very difficult and sometimes not a lot of fun. In my role as a state representative, I'm all over the place with issues and constituent services. We're happy that some of the vendors that are here tonight, if you are in need of help, some of these vendors can provide that to you if you or a loved one are suffering, if you have an issue. We do have vendors available. A lot of our facilities in the area, substance abuse facilities, are state funded, so we do maintain a relationship with many of those facilities. You can always use my office as a way to reach out, and we're happy to act as a liaison and put you in touch with those facilities. Same with Medicaid or private insurance issues, we can act as a liaison for you in that regard too. Also in this role, and a little bit surprising, I have found that I've learned a lot about drugs, more than I've ever wanted to know, and this is coming from someone who spent 10 years previously practicing law in criminal court. I've been out of that practice for about 5 years, and in meeting with several parents in my legislative office, I realized in that short time span just how rapidly things have changed. We all have these devices now that have changed parenting, changed the way that our kids can interact with the world, and have just made everything so accessible and just so easy to get. Even our most in tune and astute parents can sometimes just miss the signs. And that's why I wanted to bring everyone here tonight to gather our resources with our community partners and just get this information out there, because it was really surprising to me, not only as a parent, but just as somebody who works in the capacity to make change on a state level, to make sure that we're doing what we need to be doing as a government to protect our kids. I am happy to report, hopefully you've seen in the news, that we did, as a state legislature, outlaw the purchase of the juuling and the vaping devices for young adults under 21 years of age. That law is going to take effect July 1st of this year. I think that you're going to find some of the presentations tonight to be pretty surprising. I know in my conversations with law enforcement and our community partners that we have up here, it continues to rapidly evolve and rapidly change, and I'm always very interested to be on top of these things, so that in my discussions with constituents and with parents, that just for my own knowledge, that I can sort of relay it back to them. And I know there'll be things up here that are going to surprise me, and I'm going to be doing just as much homework that you all are tonight. So thank you all for braving the cold and being here with us this evening. Our first speaker this evening has 40 years of law enforcement experience. I always feel safer with him in the room. He is tough but fair, and I know he loves the community and would do anything to protect it. So I'm going to introduce to you Chief Tim O'Connor. And if it's okay with all of you, I'm going to just maybe ask some questions and kind of lead the discussion a little bit, but I want to pass it off to you, Chief.
Thank everybody for turning out. As Natalie said, I have it's over 40 years now in the criminal justice system, and I've been around a long time. And I grew up in the city of Pittsburgh. I never saw heroin. And then I got out of the Army. I used to drink in some tough bars over in the north side. I never saw heroin. In 1980, when I got hired as city police officer, I saw heroin for the first time in my life. And I don't know I guess a lot of you all remember the Civic Arena. Everybody remembers. Well, if you went above the Civic Arena, there's a street there called Crawford. Once you stepped across Crawford Street, there was a lot of vacant houses. And They were called shooting galleries, which is where the addicts would congregate and they would shoot heroin. And they would have piles of syringes in these places, like a kit like this. But you'd go in there, it'd be like a pile of dozens of used syringes on the floor. Human waste, alcohol bottles. And that's where you would find it. You'd probably find it in the inner city, and not everywhere in the Hill District either, just in certain spots like there. And then I move fast forward to around the year 2000, 20 years, and in that span, it went from an urban inner city problem with mostly, if you had a demographic that would use it up to around the 80s, it would probably be a middle-aged black male would probably have been the addict. So you get around the year 2000, and it's switched. Now it's a suburban and a rural problem with mainly younger white males predominantly using heroin. And around that time, I was a lieutenant on the north side of Pittsburgh. I ran the afternoon shift, and my officers would be arresting people from Butler because they were coming in and buying heroin and sitting there outside the back of the police station with needles in their arms. So it has evolved, and it has ebbed and flowed since then until we got to, I would say, around 2015, and we started seeing this big spike in overdoses around the country. And Western Pennsylvania got hit especially hard. And when you look at someone like place like Bethel Park, we're not immune. So we've had our share, and I think since I came here 5 years ago, this has been, I would say, my number one problem has been dealing with the overdoses and the trying to battle the dealers and keeping them out of Bethel Park. So I'll just give you some statistics and some information that you may not be aware of. A lot of people got started on how they get into heroin. How did this happen? And we started treating people in this country for whatever their medical conditions is. Like the judge here, he had surgery. They give you pain pills. It was becoming, this is what we do now. We treat for pain. And when you get off of those pain pills, some people were on them a long time, now they're addicted, and then they shut your prescription off. So where do people go to fill that? They go to the street. You can buy pills illegally on the street, but they're very expensive. So then people go to heroin as an alternative. And we have almost like 2 generations of people that got hooked on this stuff. And also there's other people that used other drugs, gateway drugs, and then they graduated to heroin. But when we got to the middle of the decade, in this country, we're in a full-blown opioid crisis. And again, Western Pennsylvania was one of the areas impacted very hard by it. Yeah, there's a syringe in there, a cooking spoon, and a tie-off so they can put that around their arm and get a vein to bulge out. But here's what's happening now. They even bypass this now. They just put the heroin down and they snort it right into their nostrils. So we will find syringes on some people. Other ones we won't. And the ones that we don't, they probably just snorted it right into their nose. So where does heroin come from? It's an opioid. It comes from the poppies. They grow them down south, and they get brought up here and distributed throughout the United States by the Mexican cartels. So they have a stranglehold almost on distributing heroin throughout the United States. Now, do I say this? Yeah, but you know where I got this from? The FBI. You go to the FBI and they can show you arrows and routes coming up from the various cartels and where they go, usually to the major cities, and then they distribute them out from there. Usually it goes to local dealers, usually. I have read recently one of the cartels is experimenting and cutting out the middlemen and distributing it straight to the dealers. I don't know how that's going to work out for them. So what happened, heroin, a lot of people use heroin, nothing happens to them. But we started seeing around 2015 is the heroin's being mixed with fentanyl, which is a synthetic opioid. They make this stuff in labs, and a lot of it is made in China. And it gets shipped either to Mexico or to dealers here. When they get the heroin, they mix the fentanyl in themselves, and it's a very toxic, potent mix. And when you take this stuff, it can kill you. And we saw a spike in fatal overdoses, and I can just show you. Here's what happened in Allegheny County. In 2017, there was 735 people died from drug overdoses. 735 people. But the good news, in 2018, it was about 400 some people, just over 400. So we had a dramatic drop. And last year, the stats aren't even in yet, but it'll probably be around 200. 200. So what happened? How do we drop like that? Somebody said Narcan. I think that's a big reason for it. I'm going to pass. Has anybody ever seen Narcan? Well, you will now. Chuck, you want to give one on each side of the room? That little vial is a lifesaver. It brings people back literally from the dead. It reverses the effects of the opioid overdose within seconds. And so what has BPPD done? We got everybody trained in the middle of 2016. And the other chiefs out here recognized, along with Tri-Community South, our EMS service, we needed to do something. So we got everybody trained on how to distribute this. How do we use this if we get to the scene and someone's down? So we got all the officers trained. We had our first deployment on October the 31st of 2016, Halloween Eve. We used that and brought a woman back. Since that time till today, we've had a total of 44 incidents where we've used that on. That's just the police. We've also had family members using it. The medics have used it. But just us alone, it's been 44 incidents. And sometimes we've had to use 2 doses, and sometimes we've had to use 3 doses to bring people back. And they're $100 a piece. And thank God St. Clair Hospital, through their foundation, gets that out to the EMS service, and they give it to us, and we can go out and we can save people, and it doesn't cost us a dime. So if you didn't know that, that's a really good benefit from them down there, that they take care of us like that. Some places around the country have had financial difficulties, sheriff's departments and that, in purchasing this because they're going through it so fast. But we haven't had that problem here, and we're fortunate for that. So as we look around, I think last year was the first year in like 2 decades where the country as a whole experienced a decrease in overdoses instead of it going up. But there's still more work to be done. More work to be done. Here at Bethel Park Police Department, we created our own drug task force. And we have about a dozen? How many? About 14. About 14 of us that are all, in addition to whatever our normal duties are, patrol, detective. If there's an issue, somebody's dealing out of their house, somebody's coming out here and dealing, we're on them. We have been successful. We've made a couple of arrests where we've had people evicted from their homes who were doing this. usually rental properties, and we had a couple guys over on Park, and they had weapons in there, had guns in there. We got rid of them. Walnut Street, we had a woman selling heroin out the front door there. We also had on Brady Place, we had a guy named Glenn Perella. In 2016, he administered a fatal overdose. He gave it to a female by the name of Shannon Fashion. She took it in his house and died. We were able to put a case together. We arrested Mr. Perella for drug delivery resulting in death, and we got a conviction. We also arrested a woman named Peaches, Deborah Taylor, who was from Carnegie, who brought the drugs in to Bethel Park, sold them to Glenn Perella, who gave it to Shannon Fashion. So we got, and then there was a third person. She did not get charged with drug delivery by death. She was a more of a bit player. Took a lot of hard work. These are hard cases to make, but we were able to do that in that instance, and both of them were convicted and did time in jail. So we are fighting on all fronts. You know, we try to have our ear to the ground. If we get information that there is dealing going on out there, we'll look at it. And sometimes people tell us things and it doesn't pan out, but other times it does. So through our efforts, we're going to try and save lives. With the Narcan, we're going to try and put people in jail. And we also have a drug box in our police station, because you'll see, like, once a year they'll advertise on the news. The DEA, this is Take Back Drug Weekend. If you got old pills, opioids and that, you want to get rid of them, well, we can do that now. We have our own 24/7, 365. So if you have your opioids and you want to get rid of them, and you don't want grandkids or somebody getting hold of them, you bring them up and they're in a plastic baggie, and we'll dispose of them for you any time of the day or night. We want to get that stuff off the street. So the only other point I wanted to bring up to you guys is the age range of our people that have overdosed and died. Our oldest person has been 68. I think we've had 3 people in their 60s. Can anybody tell me what our youngest person's age was? Anybody want to take a guess? 22. 22. So one of the misconceptions, and I've heard this out there, there's some people that, these Facebook warriors and people running their mouths for various things, that there's heroin high up here. Well, that's bullshit. And if somebody's saying that, they know not of what they speak, okay? So the youngest person that we've had as a fatality has been 22. I think our youngest fatal overdose has been like 20. The big age range is up in the late 20s and into the 30s, but I says we've had 3 people in their 60s that have overdosed and died. So, and it's everywhere. It's not where, the Mine 3 area of Bethel Park, which is a lot of rental property and older homes. We've had an overdose death in Grandview Farms. I think is the most expensive housing plan in Bethel Park. We've had them over on the border with St. Clair. This stuff cuts across economic lines and age brackets. So the one thing I can tell you, tonight is, and going forward, I think it's a good thing that we've had our overdoses decrease. We kind of parallel the county here. When the county had over 700 deaths, 8 of them were ours. When it went down to 400, 4 of them were ours. Went down to 200, 4 of them were ours, in the 200s. So we're kind of roughly paralleling what happens in Allegheny County out here. But we're not going away, and if we have information that somebody's dealing, we'll look into it. Sometimes, and a lot of times, we've been successful, and we've even had some of these dealers. They come out here, they bring it out here, the big dealers, and deal it. And we picked a bunch of them off and put them in jail. And we're going to continue to do that. We're not going away. We'll continue to carry the Narcan and save who we can. We've already used it once this year. We've had one fatality this year. We've had one Narcan save this year. You know, we're not through February yet, but it's a positive trend. And when I took my notes here for my presentation, and I wrote this here, I wrote it in green. You know why? Because green is the color of hope. Right? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Did I turn it off? Am I good? Thank you so much, Chief. That was really enlightening. I have a question. What is the average amount of times, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, that someone can use heroin before they can become addicted? Is it one time? Yeah.
It could vary. It could be once, and it could be someone who has been using heroin for decades. Sometimes when people are clean for a long time, maybe they went to rehab and they relapse, and their first time on relapse, because obviously, like anything, they can gain a tolerance to it. Also, we know that heroin's being cut with fentanyl and carfentanil, and it really depends on what it's cut with. So it literally could be the very first time, the 5th time, the 10th time, or someone who didn't use in a decade. And it's very much that random.
I'm going to show them this to you, because that's a good point. Yes, this is a stamp bag. This is what the dealers put the heroin in. So you say, oh, well, they can use one of these, and somebody says, boy, that was so great. I'm going back.
How much does one of those cost?
Yeah, $5 to $10, depending. Yeah. So if you buy 10 of these, that's a bundle. That's a bundle. If you have 55 bundles or 50 bags, that's a brick. So we arrested a guy, when was that? It was in February, a year ago. He punched me in the face. He had bought 6 bricks in the north side and came out here and sold 2 of them in the Walmart. He didn't get out of Walmart. So he went to jail, and we just got a conviction on him. He pled guilty to intent to deliver this fall. He got 1 to 4 years in jail. But the city has him on other charges, so he's going away longer. But this is what they do. They put it in here, and what can a heavy user go through in a day? Multiple bags, right?
Heavy users, and a lot of our retail crime and property crime is really associated with drug activity. There are drug addicts that have a $500 a day drug habit. So it starts, yes, with one stamp bag, but they quickly gain a tolerance. And the misconception, I'm not a medical professional, but I've talked to enough people who are addicted to heroin that they're not trying to get high because woohoo, it's fun. They're trying to get high so they don't get sick. They're trying to maintain their new normal, and that's why they'll go to extremes of lying to their families and stealing and doing things they wouldn't normally do because of withdrawal symptoms and how it does adversely affect the body, that they are literally trying just to feel normal. The first high, I'm sure, is great, but then after a while, it's not really a party drug like most people think it is. Like, it really isn't.
Yeah, and the dealers will stamp these, and they'll put on it like Donald Trump or Batman or something, and then people say, oh, that's good shit, I want that Donald Trump stuff, and they'll go out seeking that, and they put their stamp on it. I don't know why they do that, but they do
For identification purposes,
Yeah.
so people, can ask for that, and sometimes it's just more commonly known. Every once in a while, you'll find some without the stamps on it, but they usually, if you buy pure heroin, it's expensive, so they'll cut it sometimes with just baking soda, and sometimes they'll cut it for the effects with the fentanyl or the carfentanil, and that's really dangerous because small amounts can cause an overdose, and you never know what you're getting.
And when we go to a scene of an overdose, we have to collect this stuff, for evidence purposes, and it puts the officers at risk now, since that's been mixed, especially since they've been mixing the fentanyl in with it. So everybody should have gloves in their pocket. You're picking this up, you should have gloves in your pocket. From Tri-Community, we got these good masks for everybody to wear. And then Mr. O'Brien's here, Consul he'll tell you it was good enough. They gave us $3,000, and we bought this thing. It's called a drug hood. So when they bring this stuff into the station now, they put it under this hood, and they switch a button, and any of the fumes in that are sucked up into a filter. They don't go out and disperse into the room where somebody might be writing a report. We have our own room, and we have this drug hood now, just to try and offer a measure of protection to the officers. And we don't field test drugs anymore. We had field testing kits, so it'll tell you what it is. We took them all off. Let the county crime lab downtown figure out what it is. We're not touching that stuff. But just know that the officers are at risk every time they go to a drug overdose call.
Thank you. Does anyone have, I just want to take a pause here before we move on to our next subject matter. Does anyone have a question for the chief regarding heroin? I'll bring the microphone back to you. Do we have a second mic? I'll get my exercise tonight.
Hello, I have a question for you. I'm not sure if it's part of your section or not, but like kind of our big concern is what latitude, which I hope is a lot, authority or manner do you have to keep drugs out of the schools?
Well, we work closely with the schools. We have a school resource officer that's assigned, it's a Bethel Park police officer, and that officer is assigned during the school day to the schools. And we also work closely with the school administration, and the school district hired 4 new police officers. They're school district police officers. We work in conjunction with them. And like I said, we have not seen, my part of this is the heroin. We're not seeing the heroin up there. Detective Dixon's going to be coming up, I think, next. She was the school resource officer for what, like 2 years?
Yes.
And I'll tell you a little bit, she formerly worked in Boca Raton, Florida, and for 5 years, and while she was there, she was on a drug task force in South Florida, which is pretty busy. So she was good, keeping her eye open on what's going on up there, and what we were seeing up there is not heroin. And we also have a drug dog here in Bethel Park, G's. He was purchased, we got a grant from Ben Roethlisberger's foundation to get G's. He was trained out at the Pittsburgh Police Canine Academy, and he is a drug dog. And periodically, G's goes through the school, and I'm happy to report he doesn't find anything, which is good. So we do have ongoing efforts up there. And the one thing I am pleased about is so far, we're not seeing the heroin up there. Okay?
Anyone else for the chief? We'll move into Detective Dixon here, and as the chief iterated, she has 19 years of law enforcement experience. I wouldn't want to be one of her children. I'm sure they don't get away with anything, but Detective Dixon.
Thank you, and no, they don't. My husband threatened he was going to bring him here tonight, and I said that's a little rough. They get it every day. So, but to answer some of your questions, and I'm glad you brought it up, and we're going to be touching base. Primarily, my part is to touch base of the youth, the young in the school. I just came out of the schools last August. I spent 2 years as a school resource officer. I currently do majority of the juvenile investigations and also the narcotic investigations. So between all different age groups, I'm studying narcotics, doing the investigations. I am not a computer expert, but doing enough investigations and going through enough kids' phones and being able to track criminals of all, from I'm just going to buy a little bit for me versus I'm going to distribute to young kids because, that's my bread and butter over there. You learn a lot. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about here because I think that's what everyone wants to know. How do we prevent it? Because unfortunately, when it comes to heroin, and we sadly have to deal with families who, when we do respond to an overdose death, they basically stay away. They all say, I waited for this day to come. And it was unfortunate because it's such a horrible drug and a horrible disease, and it's very difficult to fight. So I want to focus on what can we do to before that point, because again, some people do just get addicted, like the chief said, because of pain medications. I think that the medical field and the legislation and the pharmacies are doing a much better job about prescribing now. I think obviously everyone realized what epidemic, and you definitely see the changes of actually seeing pills on the street. But that also opened a door for this whole black market and dark web and how they, our youth can get a hold of stuff. So when we talk about kids, our youth, their drugs look different than drugs looked back when most of us grew up. Most of us grew up with the roaches and little marijuana cigarettes, the water bongs, and, it was like, okay, everyone, put your money together, and they could buy marijuana that probably had zero potency because, now they have hydroponic labs and know how to boost the THC content, but that's a different topic. Our kids' drugs are schools, and they look like this, the vapes. So, and you can pass this around now. Thanks. So kids today, I'm just going to go with a couple scenarios. So in our school, we did, and for my 2 years, and I know the judge is going to speak on this too, that when our children are caught with vapes in the school or any drug paraphernalia, they, if they're caught in the school, they'll have a school punishment that the school handles, and they do an excellent job of working with whatever the school sanctions are. Law enforcement, either the school officers or the Bethel Park Police SRO, if charges are warranted, they'll do it. So if a kid's caught with a vape, and a lot of times they'll go to see Judge Arnone, and he's going to talk about his alternative programs like the Smokeless Saturday that he offers to try to educate kids. Our whole goal with children, of course, is to make sure they don't do it again and educate them on the effects of it. But we've also all been kids, and sometimes we don't listen the first time, and sometimes it happens again. And it's really intriguing. When Natalie picked up her phone and said, "It's all right here," it really is. And so I'm just going to kind of run through a day of at the school when you catch a kid with a vape. You kid with a vape. It's not mine, okay? It's in your backpack, so it's yours for all intents and purposes. And then the parents could say, "Where'd you get it?" "I bought it from a guy." "What's a guy?" "His name is Jim." Like, okay. So then the parent gets all mad that drugs are being dealt in Bethel Park and we're getting these horrible nicknames. And when I work with the families, because I just want to work with them so they can stop and deal with their child's problem. We're going to deal with the overall problem. We very much strictly enforce if we have any drug dealers in Bethel Park or if people are bringing drugs. I can't say there's any more passion in any agency than right here in Bethel Park for going after people who want to bring drugs to our kids or to our community. But a lot of our kids, they're buying their vapes, their THC, their benzo strips, they're buying them online. And they're getting shipped to their house. So they're getting shipped to grandma's house, or the neighbor's house. And sometimes they're using the parents' credit cards. Sometimes they're using PayPal accounts. And then they tell, "Hey, what's this charge on my PayPal account?" "Oh, that was just something for my game." It's not. The accessibility, and it's very difficult. And, it's hard because a lot of us aren't really up on what's going on with kids. So, and your kids, they try to out-talk you because you don't know, unless you're really savvy with apps and, different texting devices. Because as parents, we check our kids' phones, we check their texts, right? Do you think kids actually use real text anymore? No. They use messaging apps because most messaging apps are harder to trace. They're encrypted. The parents, they know their parents might have 360 monitoring and are reading their text messages. So they're very easily able to circumvent our normal protective parent measures. So when I tell parents this, they say, "My kid wouldn't know how to do that." You're going to lose the battle right then and there. If they don't know how to do it, they can read a tutorial and learn how to do it very quickly. And I just hope that if you guys can take anything from this, it is just leaving here and knowing how to monitor your children's phones in addition to having the conversations with them. I think that if you have young children, it's a much easier battle the first time you give them an iPad or a Kindle or whatever electronic device, and even work up to the phone as to setting the restrictions as to the parental controls, not letting them download their own apps. Young kids shouldn't have access to their cameras, or if you have an Apple product, Safari or Google. You can very easily, in the own settings on your phone, set your devices. So I'm talking the little ones, and then work your way up to the older ones. It's a lot easier to never have to take it away. But say you're already at that point, and maybe now after this, you're like, maybe I should go home and rethink how my 13-year-old has their phone or has their device. So kids have their own way of communicating, and they use different apps, and we have some flyers and stuff for you. But apps like Text Now, YouNow, Kik, Discord, they're all messaging apps. And again, your kid's gonna have a story they're all cute little apps, and you're gonna say, what's that? Oh, that's just how I talk to my friends. Sounds innocent enough, right? And a lot of times, so these apps are used for the gaming community. And that's actually how a lot of them started. Like Discord, it was for Fortnite. I know it's kind of dying off craze, but it got real crazy, and then everyone's like, oh, you don't have to go through the app, you can go on Discord now. Well, it's also a community for lots of different people to talk. And in doing that, you can start to ask questions. And then from there, you can talk to people, be like, oh, well, I want to get a vape with some THC oil. All right, well, or you can go on Reddit and learn how to do it. And then it's like, all right, well, how can you do it? You got a credit card, PayPal? No, my parents will find out. Okay, well, let's get a Cash App for you. They'll develop their own Cash Apps to pay for it. And if they can't get a hold of a Cash App, the gift cards they get for Christmas, they can convert them into a cryptocurrency and use a Bitcoin app to go on the dark web and purchase benzos, Xanax, THC, kind of anything they want. Our kids' drug dealers don't look like this anymore. You know, and you don't know what you're getting, and that's the difficulty. And this, what's really frightening. I've had some wonderful parents who, the second that they realized that their kid was under the influence, they took him to the hospital, they got him tested so we were able to see what's in their system, and they immediately came to us with their phones and say, hey, how do I help my kid? That kid didn't get arrested. We got him in treatment. But we found out he was ordering drugs. He sent it to a different house. I mean, it's so easy to say, like, oh, Graham, pick up that package. I accidentally sent it to your house, right? Or some kids get packages delivered to their house every day and the parents don't notice, because why would you think that drugs were being delivered to your house? And, that's just what is happening. We're not seeing heroin in the high school. There's no one's trying to hide anything. It'd be the first one up there breaking down doors if there was, but we are seeing vapes, and we are seeing THC, and we are seeing, kids outside of school primarily dealing with MDMA and ecstasy. And that's through everywhere. It's not just Bethel Park. It's not just Upper St. Clair. It's all over. But in the school, we do those, Officer Gaulis is up to high school right now. He has a lot of experience, and he's been able to do a lot of detection. But I think the question, initially was we made a lot of arrests. We made a lot of diversion programs in the 2 years that I was there, and it's still going on right now. So when it comes to the Juuls, and I've had a lot of parents say, well, at least they're not smoking cigarettes. I'm not a doctor, but nicotine's nicotine, and the delivery method of the Juul, that amount of nicotine, is not good for your child and not good for yourself. Everyone, I was a kid once too, and I probably told my parents if I got in trouble what they wanted to hear too. Don't get me wrong, there might be some kids it's easier for them to buy them online, so maybe they are selling them to their friends, but it's very vast. They're doing it, and we can talk about it here tonight, but so much of the information you need to know is on your kid's phone. So what you can do about it is, on your phone, your child shouldn't be able to download their own apps. So that's the number one defense. So if, I have my phone here, and you can set up restrictions on your child. Most likely their phone is in your name. So if your kid comes and says, or the kid just downloads Discord, well, they can do it, and they can do and talk to whoever they want, and you'll never know. Versus, hey, Dad, can I have Discord? Okay, well, let me research it before I approve it, because I'll have to put in a special code for it to download. That is, because I can name 5 apps, but tomorrow there's going to be 5 more. So that's what the biggest thing is, the communication with your children and monitoring your phone. And there's no reason to have messaging apps when they can text. And your kids will tell you, because my kids tell me this too, well, no one will talk to me then, because everyone else talks on Snapchat or Kik. Okay, well, your true friends will talk to you. My kids talk all the time, so people will still talk to you. But it's very difficult, and let's face it, we're all busy, and we have lives, and this is a challenge that I never anticipated but it scares me so much that it's exhausting. But the earlier you do it, the more consistent it gets easier, and that's the thing. So, we don't want you to ever get to the point where you're finding these empty bags of heroin all over, or you're the parent that said, I've been waiting for this phone call. I personally believe in gateway drugs, and, they're starting with a vape and maybe THC oil, and then they're sucking down benzo strips, and half the time they don't know what they have. So I just think that it's and let your kids know, well, hey, this is why I'm strict on you, and this is why I'm going to monitor your phone, set restrictions. And it even goes into, we're here to talk about drugs tonight, but even extortion for sexually explicit images, everything is all through here. And we start at such a young age. And when you're on these group forums, anyone's talking to your child. I've had young kids on YouTube, and someone says, oh, go to Omegle if you want to talk to someone about My Little Pony. Okay, I'll go to that. And then all of a sudden, someone on Omegle, My Little Pony, is telling them how to turn on their Skype so they can do a video with them. That happens. I'm not here to scare any of you all, and I can't. Sometimes I see your faces and I get upset because I don't want to, I don't want anyone to feel that way. But there are precautions. You can set restrictions that after 9:30 your kid's phone completely shuts down other than for emergencies, and at 5:30 it turns back on. Our phones are great. They have these mechanisms in them in addition to other safeguards you can do. But let your kids know, I'm here and I'm going to look at because I care. Because it's scary out there, and so often we just talk to people because we want all these followers and we all want these friends. Go through your kids' contacts on their Snapchat, on their Instagram. Do you physically know this person? No, then you're unfollowing them. If they have an account, you don't just follow them, you mirror their account on yours. So if they have a Snapchat, you have their Snapchat on your phone, not I just follow them, because then you can read the direct messages, the DMs. So it's a different world for our youth, and I will say, we as a police department are very proactive. Our assistant superintendent's here in the crowd today. She can attest to we've been very proactive in addressing problems. Most of the times hopefully if a kid gets busted once with a vape and, the family, and they don't get in, but sometimes we do just have chronic repeat offenders. But a lot of times kids are going to be sneaky. They're going to, and the phones make it so much easier to be sneaky. And these apps, they're all designed to help them do that. And, the thing with everyone's like, oh, the dark web, my kid wouldn't know that. It's pretty easy. A Tor, which is, an acronym for the onion router, which peels layers so that they're encrypted, and they're very difficult for law enforcement. And they can get on there, and they can talk to some anonymous person, and they can pay them, and the drugs will arrive at their door. And that's, if anything comes out of here tonight, know that that's where we have to be proactive, so we don't have to get to the statistics that Chief O'Connor noted. So I'm here, and I'll take any questions at all, so feel free to ask at any time, or scenarios, anything, I'm happy to ask. Any questions? Yes.
For your audience watching,
Yes.
or will watch, could you give descriptions or definitions? You said THC numerous times,
Yes.
but there's a lot of people who don't know what that is. And the other, you mentioned benzos and so on. Again, they don't know, but so for the audience, could you give definitions?
So in the vapes, they can have the nicotine vapes, but they can also order and get THC, which is basically a liquid form of marijuana, and then inhale it through their vape. Benzos is the alprazolams, the benzodiazepine. I have a very difficult time pronouncing that word, but the Xanax, and the different drugs to that effect that we used to try to get from doctor shopping, and but they've become very difficult to get on the street because the medical, that everyone's done a great job of stopping the overprescribing, but you can get clandestine or pill pressed maids of the alprazolams, which are the benzos, or they can soak them in strips. So the kind of those Listerine tabs, sometimes you put in your mouth and they can dissolve for fresh breath. They can take it in liquid form and put in that, and kids order those online. I've seen those come in. So there are different types of drugs. An alprazolam's kind of going to give you that calming the Xanax, they're very popular amongst the youth. So that's the type of stuff, and it can all be delivered to your house. Yeah, and the bath salts, you name it, it can pretty much almost all be delivered to your house. Heroin, we will say we still really have the traditional heroin dealers, cocaine, that still tends to be the more hand-to-hand transactions, but our youth, I'm talking about our high school kids and our young ones, it's really starting with that. And some of the statistics the chief named of people are young who have overdosed in their 20s. Yeah, of course, a lot of them were Bethel Park students, and it's heartbreaking because we knew them. But they, their heroin addiction started after they left school.
I'm going to ask again, because you mentioned bath salts.
Mm-hmm.
Judge, could you tell the audience what they do with that? Because for people in the audience, they're like, what? What do they do?
Well,
And what do they do with it?
well, there's K2, there's spice, there's bath salts, some stuff you eat, some stuff you can bake in things, some stuff you can smoke, snort, you name it, they can do it. There's many different delivery systems, but they're drugs that are manufactured by people who do not work in the pharmaceutical company. So you don't know what additives are being mixed with them. You don't know what you're actually inhaling and how the body will react to it or the levels in it. So you can have various reactions. And same thing with the ecstasy or the MDMA, the club drugs, the Molly. Sometimes you'll hear songs refer to certain drugs. They are drugs for hallucinogenics, but you don't know what you're getting, and you have no idea how your body will react to them. So after one hit of ecstasy or Molly or MDMA, your brain could be fried, or you could do it 5 times. It would never, affect you per se as an overdose, but it, very much changes the chemicals of your brain.
I mean, this was really eye-opening, and I was watching some of the reactions in the audience when you were talking and almost speaking a different language. I mean, to me, I don't know how familiar those of you in the audience are with the cash apps.
Yes.
Can you?
It's very difficult because I know some of us are starting to figure out what like Venmo are and stuff, because, sometimes with your PTA or your kids' sports, just Venmo me the money. And, so I'm, as a user, I barely understand half these apps myself. But whenever I do investigations, because again, I'm going through their digital footprint and I'm able to see and backtrack how they got to that point. So my information really comes from being able to investigate cases with young adults or adults for their drugs. So that's what we're saying, that it's not like where did they get that money, or where did they get the cash, or how would they be able to order something online like we traditionally think, order Amazon, I just use my credit card. And then some vape shops, just you can order stuff online. So it's just the accessibility versus a young kid, calling up a drug dealer, out in the Mon Valley and be like, hey, can I meet you? It doesn't have to be that way. Not to say it can't happen, but the accessibility is you don't have to talk to anybody, to a stranger you don't know or know what to do. You can, hey, yeah, that sounds good. Or maybe you start with just the vaping and move to a THC vape, and then all of a sudden they offer you the benzo strips. Yeah, sure, I'll try that. And it kind of, in the community, so because now you're on these messaging boards and you're on Discord and you're on these different apps, and people start talking, and then it's like, yeah, let's try that. Oh, yeah, let's get some. We'll split some. Yeah, my parents are going out this weekend. Let's go there. And it really is just the accessibility and the curiosity. But again, I've had kids do it once and end up in the hospital.
So in terms of when it's being delivered in the mail, do you find that it's coming within the state, within the United States? Is it coming from out of the country?
Often it's coming from out of the country.
Okay.
Yeah. From all over. It can come from China, it can come from all over. Sometimes it'll come here and then get repackaged and sent elsewhere. It can come from California. Like I said, I'm very hesitant on giving people templates because I don't want people to focus on like it only comes from here. But, I just worked a case and they had stuff that came from California and they had stuff that came from China. And I will say that, ICE and the postal police do a great job with their interdiction too, but, there's a lot of packages coming in every day. So if it's really just asking that questions, what did you get in the mail? Oh, it's just a shirt. Let me see. And I know it sounds that simple, but those conversations, can really change it versus they ordered something the first time they took it. You don't know what they took, and now all of a sudden they're in the hospital. So it's really, One time I had a young woman, and she was having some truancy issues, and the judge and I were working with her, and we went to the house, and the mother and I were in her room, and she's like, I just don't understand. I'm like, there's a box right there full of drugs, like full of drugs. She's like, I don't understand. What do you mean? Like, no, give me that. And she's like, starts freaking out. Who in the school? And everyone says, who in the school gave this to her? I said, she have access to your credit card? Yeah. Can I see your receipt? I said, you bought them for her. So, it's okay to snoop. And, I'm sorry for any young people, but here's the thing. It's okay. And it's okay to tell them you're doing it because you care, to ask questions and to not just they're going to give you an answer, and it's going to sound good. Let's face it. They're going to give you an answer for anything. They're kids. We did too. But not taking things on face value, I think, is the most important thing. It's basic parenting. It's just gotten a lot harder because they can out-talk us when it comes to this. And, for the social media and the young kids, we shouldn't let them go carte blanche. Like TikTok sounds so much fun, but it's also a way for people to talk to your kid and view your kid. There are age-appropriate limits on apps. I highly suggest we stick to them. With a lot of the apps, they have their own DM services, so they can circumvent the parents reading their texts. Snapchat has a your eyes only feature, so you can put photos in there you don't want your parents to see. So if your kid does have Snapchat, it's fine. Just make sure they're using it responsibly and that you have their code for their for my eyes only and the different apps. And it's just transparency, and it's difficult. It really is.
Thank you so much, Detective. That's a lot of really great information, so I'm glad we were able to memorialize it. Does anyone else have a question for the detective right now? And I'm sure she'll, be staying a few minutes after if anything comes to mind. Next up, I'm sure that most in the room are familiar with our magisterial district justice for the communities of Bethel Park and Upper St. Clair. And in my time working in the criminal court system, I had gotten to know several magisterial judges throughout the Tri-County region and many good people on the bench. Judge Arnone is above and beyond what is expected of him. He's a great resource for our community. He's created this LEAD program that he has taken directly into the schools. I know he's done it in Bethel Park and Upper St. Clair, Peters Township, and a couple of other local school districts as well to educate our children. It's important that we as parents and adults in the community are educated, but we also need to take it directly into the schools. So I'm so glad that he's here tonight to share a little bit of his program with us too this evening. Thanks, Ron.
Thank you, Representative Mihalek, and thank you for putting this program on. I want to thank you. You are so entrenched in the district and do so much, and this program is great. I want to thank you all for being here this evening too. And hopefully for those that watch this on YouTube or on TV, they're going to get something out of it. It's so important. Some people can't get to these programs, but education and awareness is key to obtaining solutions. And of course, I want to thank the Chief and Detective Dixon. They do such good work on behalf of our community to get the drugs out of our community, and we have a great working relationship. And we're very lucky to have such an excellent police department. Some of the things the Chief talked about with regard to heroin, it's very poignant, and he's right, it runs across all demographics. And let me tell you, just like the Chief was saying, east, south, north, or west, it's all over the county, it's all over the region. There's no two ways about that. And Bethel Park is no more affected than the North Hills and so forth. And I was entrenched in this some 12, 13 years ago when I was working in the streets with the DEA and the FBI. I saw it firsthand. God bless you. I saw it firsthand, and it started out, like the Chief said, with those getting prescribed. And I was on the forefront with the DEA and the FBI of putting medical doctors in jail. Education and awareness and what the government, both federally, state level, and local, have done over the last number of years has gotten us to this point today where, again, the Chief was talking about a reduction. reduction of overdose drugs, and the education and awareness has brought about a reduction in those trying these drugs. And that's what our program sets out, both not only with drugs, but social media and leadership. And again, you being here this evening is great because you allow yourself to be aware and make sure that your kids know what's going on. And like the detective was saying, some of these drugs that are made in labs that are synthetic are some of the worst drugs that our kids are getting a hold of. And it can kill them. One dose can kill them. It can send them into a seizure. I unfortunately know all too many stories around the area where families have suffered so badly because of the drug addiction within their families, with kids, brothers, sisters, fathers. You know, it becomes a family affliction. You know, Pastor Jim has seen it, and we're lucky to have a good church community in the area that helps these families out. But you know, the detective's right. We work on so many proactive measures of awareness and diversion programs. And in my court, you know, so often we're not looking to necessarily penalize, although we do. And I tell kids, you know, we're here to try to help you, and I'll give you maybe a bite at the apple. But unfortunately, like I had a young man in the last couple weeks, he's now 20 years old. 5 or 6 years ago, I told him, you're going to end up back in here, and you're either going to be dead or in jail. And he's in jail right now. And his parents put their heads in the sand. They didn't get it. They were allowing him to become dependent on drugs. And, you know, it's unfortunate, and we're going to briefly go through some of these slides and get into the program. And don't worry, Russ will change it up a little bit for you since you just saw it. But, you know, it is eye-opening, and I want you to be aware of some of the things that are going on in the community and in the district. So, Brad, let's run through some of these slides. So the first thing we do is we bring about, some of this is some video. We don't have audio, unfortunately, tonight, but you know, we talk about the reasons why we're in the district and why we do these types of programs. We do it because we want our communities to be better. We want our kids to be better. We want opportunities for kids to be successful. And so that's why we're going in. And by the way, some people ask, well, why do you go to neighboring communities, or why are you doing this on a more regional basis? Because of social media, and because there's so many connections now, like Detective Dixon was talking about, we think it's important to go across those barriers and make sure that regionally, you know, the awareness is there. Because now our kids have so many easy connections to kids that live in the North Hills or live in, you know, the East Hills. So that's why we do this. And go ahead, Brett. So go ahead. So, you know, we start out on this journey of mapping out the future and looking at, you know, what direction and what distractions and decisions and discipline and development. Those are some of the things that we look at and talk with the kids. And we talk about, in our program, we don't just talk about negatives. We talk about leadership and positives, and we talk about the idea of what you can do to resource yourself and make yourself better. And we tell them that it's up to them. It's up to them to be able to do this. And then we get into the idea of alcohol and drugs and social media. And they're all kind of interlapping. They really are. So we look at this statistic, and Brad, go ahead and talk about the stat here.
Sure. So we talk about how, you know, underage drinking starts at a young age. You can see how it really can begin from 8th grade and how it progresses all throughout school. And then Judge and I, we talk about, Judge, you know, what are the consequences of underage drinking and...
Yeah, and we talk about the idea that not only is it fines, but it goes on your record and how it can affect the idea. Say you want to be a doctor or a nurse or go to a particular school, you might not be able to be eligible to do that because of mistakes that you made. But, you know, generally speaking, if it's a first offense, we can go through and get into a diversion program and take care of that. But beyond that, it becomes very problematic. We talk about how important it is with regard to drinking and driving and mixing substances and getting behind the wheel. Something else that's critically important is texting and driving. Look, we all have these mobile devices, and we're all probably somewhat guilty of it, but we can't let our kids see us manipulating our mobile device and expect them not to be doing it when they're 17 or 18. You know, the fact of the matter is we have to lead by example, but the AAA talks about this driving intoxicated. Texting and driving and manipulating your mobile device is beginning to surpass drunken driving for accidents and even fatalities. So be very aware of that and talk to your kids and anyone around you in that regard. And Detective Dixon did talk about vaping. And when we go to the schools, we talk about, look at this, watermelon wave, brain freeze. These were some of the labels that Joel put on some of these vapes. And what they were doing was they were marketing to your kids. And finally, the government did catch up, and Brad and I have been doing this for over a year in the schools. And then just in the last 3 or 4 months, the medical community and the government caught up, because the fact of the matter is, kids are dying from vaping. And the stuff that's in these vapes is incredible. The carcinogens, embalming fluid, stuff that's used in landscaping, and it's crazy, the chemicals that are in these vapes. And by the way, you know, Detective Dixon, I know you don't like to label with regard to where it comes from. It's coming mainly from China. I mean, that's where, I know you said that, but that's where the bulk of it is. And, you know, do we trust what's coming from China to be good for something for our kids to use? Because like I tell the kids, do you think they give two craps about you? They don't. They want your money, and that's it. And that's what we bluntly tell them. So, and then the old myths about, is it addictive? Of course it's addictive. It is, 100%. It has nicotine in it. Does it have nicotine in it? Yes, it does. And then, you know, will it cause health problems? My goodness. Now we found out it's killing kids. Hundreds of kids across the country. Lung diseases. The material gets into the lungs and expands it and kills them. And we also allow to come up with solutions like 1-800-QUIT-SMOKE, and talk about counselors in our program. And Brad and I have created a 60-page proprietary manual that's on our website that parents can use as a resource. It's www, and we'll share this with you again, www.ourleadfamily.com. We implore anyone in here and anyone listening to go onto the website and dive in and drill down on the subject matter of drugs and alcohol, vaping, social media, and then leadership, and how, give them a goal, give them objectives, give them reasons to not want to do this stuff. That's what we have to do as parents in our society. So, you know, we get in and we talk about, like the chief was saying, and this was from 2017, 70,000 overdose deaths. In Pennsylvania, nearly 6,000. And we bring up Heinz Field because we give that comparison. Imagine Heinz Field sold out. It's almost 70,000 people. That's the amount of people that died in 2017 to drug overdose deaths. And we talk about the idea of, think about terrorism. Terrorism is on our own shores right now. Forget about the Middle East and everything else, in the form of these drugs, killing our families, killing our kids, allowing it to come in from other countries, these synthetic drugs. And think about this, a 747 jet airplane full of people crashing and killing all the people on the plane every day, 365 days in a year. That's what these drugs are doing to our communities. So, it's here. THC, as the detective was talking about, in marijuana. This one's tough for me because, unfortunately, our society is sending so many mixed messages to our kids. We're going to legalize it. We're going to decriminalize it. Now 13 states in the United States have done so. It's recreational. It's okay. It's not that bad for you. You know, and then you have all these shops popping up, and you know, some of those things, medicinally speaking, the Commonwealth has legalized it medicinally. I get it, but that's because a lot of drugs come from plant-based materials, and that's what marijuana is. The Indians were smoking it a long time ago in the peace pipes, probably, right? But the fact of the matter is, it's this mixed message that's being sent out there to our kids to say it's okay. It's not okay. And it's certainly not okay for a kid to do it in the age of 14, 16, or 18. Their brains are still developing. And most of the ages in these states are 21, but unfortunately it's getting out to the streets, and they're seeing their big brothers and sisters and parents smoking it and thinking it's okay. And what's happening is there's way too much research that needs to be developed to determine whether or not this whole idea is a good idea. I personally have my own opinion. I'll tell you privately if you wish, but I have to be careful what I say because I sit on the bench. And, you know, I'm not a legislator, but Representative Mihalek is, and she's done a great job with regard to a lot of these types of situations, in particular with Pennsylvania moving the age to 21 for vape. And so in regard to moving on into, you know, the heroin and the opioids, let's move on and talk about this. The chief did touch on it a little bit, but Brad, go ahead and explain what actually heroin does to the brain.
Well, when we talk to students, the big thing that we talk about is how it actually does change the brain. It's not something psychological, it's something that's very real, and it actually changes their chemical makeup. So what it really does is it impairs their ability to think through thoughts and make decisions. So you see a lot of poor choices and poor decisions that are made when these students become addicted or become influenced by these different drugs. So we talk to them about these types of pain and things that they can experience, and they may not be aware of it because of the way that their brain is processing the different decisions that they have made. And that's why we stress the importance of getting help, and throughout the program, numerous times we have resources that are available to students. We make resources available to families afterwards so that they can go out and get the help that they need to get better.
And like the chief was saying, we don't have a heroin problem in Bethel Park, nor do we really have one in many of the high schools across the region. It is really that age group that he talked about, although there's some concerns and some growth in that area, but that's why these types of programs in schools are important to educate and make kids aware of how dangerous this stuff can be. And, you know, again, Detective Dixon stated, look, we were all kids once, and, you know, we were curious, and, you know, but this is not the stuff you want to be curious with. This stuff will kill you. The fentanyl, a speck, like the chief said, that's why they have to wear the gloves. A speck will kill you. It could kill you. That's why they have to carry the Narcan. You know, and so getting more into then, you know, we talk about the social media. And again, Detective Dixon scratched on some of the stuff with social media with Kik and some of these apps, but this is dangerous stuff too. I mean, social media is great. You know, you can look at the different aspects of positive and negative. We did when I say we, Judge Reschenthaler, now United States Congressman Reschenthaler, and Jim Dill, the Chief Technology Officer, we did a program a number of years ago called The Darker Side of Social Media. Russ remembers it. And, you know, we came up with this. This is pretty interesting, the top 10 list, if you will. Don't post information about where you're going on social media. At one time, there was a site, www.robme.com, where people were sharing information about people that would post that they're on vacation. And they would go and rob their house. But still, don't post when you're away, when it's in current time. Don't do that, okay? Avoid geotagging. Allows people to know where you're at any given time. This is an important one. The URL in HTTPS, S is for a secured site. If that S isn't there, don't go on that site. Don't navigate on it. You will get a virus. You will get afflicted. It will not be good for your computer. With regard to suspending an account, it's not the same as deleting it. Make sure your virus protection is updated on your mobile devices too. It's a little computer. Also, don't click on everything you see. Be careful who you accept as friends. Make sure all your social parameters are friends only. Don't use information as security questions that you'd commonly use, like your dog. Don't post that information, your dog's name, your birth date. And finally, this is a pretty poignant one. Digital photos, the JPEG, the TIFF or RAW format information. If you're just a little bit technologically savvy, let's say little Joey takes a picture of his dog in front of his house and posts that. If you're a little technologically savvy, somebody can get into the raw format information and know exactly where little Joey lives, exactly where he's at. That's scary. And there's a lot of people out there on social media that don't want to do good to your kids, okay? We talk a lot about bullying and cyberbullying, and it's scary. And words do hurt. Whether they're in person or online, they hurt. Kids die. Kids commit suicide over the pain and suffering that goes on social media. Be careful of that. And talk to your kids. Like Detective Dixon said, have that open dialogue. Have those conversations. Make sure that you know what's going on with them. And then you talk about decisions, good, bad, making and self-evaluation, critically important to all of us in here and to your kids. Allow them to decide how to set goals, objectives, and then evaluate how they came to those decisions. Brad?
Yeah, the fourth D we talk about is discipline, doing what you know needs to be done even when you don't want to do it. And one short, quick analogy we use is imagine you're on a highway and the person driving the car is speeding. They're going 70 miles an hour, 75, and it's only 55 zone. All of a sudden, out of the corner of their eye, they see a police officer. That person driving the
Chief
car,
O'Connor.
that person instantly hits the
Scary.
brakes. Right, and the question is, why do they hit the brakes instantly? And they do it because they know what they're doing is not right, but they know what they're doing is wrong. So we talk with students that it's not just about making decisions when people are watching, but making those choices all the time.
Go, Brad.
And the last D we talk about is development or personal development, and we say to students that the best investment that they can make is in themselves. And in this section, we give them many ways that they can get involved right there at their high school.
And it's so important for your kids to get involved and be involved and stay involved. Janet knows this at the district, and there's so many things in Bethel Park to do. We have such a great district here. And whether it's the theater or athletics or the band or dance or whatever it is, make sure they're active and involved. If they're doing that, it's very likely that they're not going to get in trouble because they've found a passion. They've found a discipline. That's so critically important. My son's was baseball, and it's still with him today. My daughter's is theater and track, and it's still, it's so important for them to be involved, and Detective knows that better than anybody with our kids and how successful they've been because they were involved in things. We also talk about the idea of, the building trades and how a lot of people, there used to be this thought process that, college is absolutely important. We definitely think it's a good idea, but the building trades is a great opportunity today. And the unions and getting involved in with them, you're not saddled with that debt. And you also, these people were making six figures all day long. And there's 16 different trades to choose from. And they're good jobs, and these are the people that build our communities. So that we give them those ideas, and we look at that. And then, one of the things that we talk about and that I talk about, go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, we talk about a lot in a program. We cover a tremendous amount of information in 45 minutes to an hour. So we end on this quote, and Judge, I'll let you explain what you mean by be a leader and not a follower.
Yeah, so, as Detective Dixon knows, and Brad and the Chief, I have a lot of different sayings, but this is one of them. And I tell the kids to be a leader, not a follower. And again, that doesn't mean you have to be the captain of the football team, captain of the cheerleading squad, lead part in the play. It means everything you do, from the littlest things to the big things, that you do your best, that you set out to put the time in and the effort in, and be a good example to your younger brothers and sisters. Show your parents that you're trying to do well. All the little things that lead up to the person that you are. That's being a leader and not a follower, and making sure that you're not, succumbing to peer pressure. One of the biggest traps with our kids today is that, succumbing to peer pressure. So try to avoid that as much as you possibly can.
Brad and Judge, the kids do listen to you when you're at the schools, and I'll give you an example, and they pay attention in the car. Me and my son were driving somewhere about 2 weeks ago, and you were at IMS last October,
Yes.
and I had a can of Pepsi sitting at the stoplight, took a drink, and started driving, and he goes, Dad, you know, Judge Arnone said you shouldn't drink and drive. And I said, well, we could have a little different conversation, buddy. But I was laughing. He listened, and it clicked.
That's great.
And he looks at my phone because I put it like face down in the little holder, and so I can't see it. And he'll look, he'll hear it buzzing, he'll see what I'm doing, and I'm like, and he'll look at me. I go, I know I can't text and drive, but they do pick it up, and they do watch what you do in the car.
Yeah.
So it's a great program that you guys do at the school. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck, and I appreciate that. That really makes us feel good. And we get a lot of good feedback from parents and families and kids. Kids come up to us after we give the presentation. They surround the stage. They're inquisitive. They're so happy we're there and that we're providing this information. And it is critical, and it's critical for you all to make sure that you're continuing to make your kids aware and educate them.
The question is, and it was mentioned, cyberbullying, and all of you could answer if need be, but you said peer pressure and then cyberbullying. You said group chats, and our experience is kids, especially young ladies, are horrible to each other. And you go from not conceding to peer pressure to then group chats. It gets pretty bad, and I'd like to hear any of your experiences with what you know.
Well, in doing investigations or things go too far that it reaches a level that, obviously the police are involved or, parents come to us. If you want to know how your children communicate, check their phones. So, and I'm talking like the 5th to 8th grade level in particularly. When they get on these group chats, they'll have conversations that would make me blush, and not much makes me blush. So I think the biggest thing is but if your kid knows you're reading it, and again, they're going to stop, and we'll, sometimes, we'll have kids, and, a lot of times they're officers' kids, when they get on a group chat and someone tries to go down that thing, they're like, hey, my mom reads these. So like I said, I think the biggest thing is if you want to know how your young son is talking about women, it's going to be on the phone. And it's not to control them, it's just to maybe change the dialogue. Like, how would you feel if someone spoke about your mother like that or your sister like that, or someone you cared about? So they're really good conversation starters, but again, if you want to know how they're talking to people, it's right here.
Yeah, check out their phones. And I would say this, we have a video on our program that will just make you cry. It's about a young lady that got bullied and committed suicide because of the group chats and the nasty tone and the things that these young ladies were saying and doing to them. And 12 young ladies in the particular state where this occurred were up on potential criminal charges. And many, including Pennsylvania, have stiffened the cyber bullying laws and legislation as it relates to that very subject matter, and kids are being charged criminally for it. And I can assure you about this, we do not, I know Detective Dixon, the chief, myself, we do not tolerate bullying in this district, and we frown upon it greatly and make sure, because we realize how hurtful and how hard it can be on young kids, particularly girls.
Judge, I think this question would be directed toward you. We've heard about the drugs, what it can do to the community and to the families. In terms of somebody coming into your courtroom, what does that mean for that individual long term? I want the parents to be able to hear what that does to a person's future, and for any kids that might get the opportunity to watch the video, what is that going to do to your future?
So in other words, if they have some occurrence of a violation of the law and they come into the courtroom, I mean, first of all, I don't care how hardcore the kid is. When they come into the courtroom, they're sweating. Some are crying. Detective is seeing it. They realize the severity of it. And what it can do is it can end up adversely affecting their future. It can, if they don't go with the program that we set out. And by the way, and I'll say this, You know, Detective Dixon and I work together a lot, and, you know, we always try to help the kids first. That's always our first plight. And she talked about how we use diversionary programs in the court. Those are put in place to try to help the kids and the families so that the suffrage is not long-term. But unfortunately, sometimes that doesn't happen, and so there's fines, there's a record. It could affect you getting into a particular school, a university. It could affect a future job. It could affect you getting into the military. It could affect so many things adversely in your life that one bad mistake, and here's what I say to a lot of the kids when I go to the schools or even in my courtroom. If it's that situation where maybe we can deal with it with a diversionary program or some community service or whatever, but I always say, if you come back again, the click of a finger, you make a mistake, could change your life forever. Whether it be a drug or choosing to text and drive and you end up wiping out a family because you made that bad choice. Bad choices can adversely affect your life for forever and even kill you. So it is that dramatic, and it can have those dramatic effects, and those are the results, unfortunately, of coming in to see the judge and being arrested by the police.
Thank you for that. I don't want to be investigated by her, I don't want to be arrested by him, and I don't want to be in front of you. Does anyone else have any questions for the panel this evening? Okay, well, thank you all so much. And I failed to introduce Ron's counterpart here. This is Brad Kilmeyer.
Yes, thank you.
And he partners with Judge Arnone, and they do the lead program together, and they do a phenomenal job. I was able to be a part of it with the Upper St. Clair High School, and it's just a great program for our kids, and I hope that you guys continue to do it and take it into the school. So thank you for being here. I appreciate it. But thank you all. Thank you, Chief. And I know we have some handouts for all of you. This is from the Pennsylvania State Police, and it does detail some of the apps that the detective was talking about. And like she said, these might all change, but at least that you'll have some of the tools at your disposal to know what to be on the lookout for with your kids' phones, and another tool in the toolbox to be a parent in this modern age. So please pass the information along to anyone that you know. And like I said, we'll make this available online. Thank you all for being here tonight. I really appreciate it.